Do you want to start having some conversations about death and explore it and think about it in a different way than you may already? And you want to do it with your friends or in a fun way, like playing a TTRPG. This is great if you're into this really hyper-specific topic, because in today's episode of the RPG Goblin, we are going to be talking about a game anthology series called Afterwords, The Guide to Death. This is a TTRPG that is on Kickstarter actually right this moment, so if you want to get the game, please check the description of this episode to find it and get it yourself, because it is really, really cool. Because Afterwards, The Guide to Death is actually a combination of 4 small games plus an essay talking all about death and kind of discovering that topic. If death is an uncomfortable topic for you, please don't listen to this episode. We have more new episodes coming out very soon that won't be on this topic, so you can just skip this one and come back later when we're not talking about something that makes you uncomfortable. Now, if you're sticking around, I think it's time for me to stop talking and let's get into it. Welcome, everyone, to the RPG Goblin, a TTRPG podcast that makes learning and exploring these games easy and fun for you. I am your host, Willow, and I am the resident goblin and the one who asks all the questions because I'm obsessed with these games. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about a project and an anthology of games called Afterwords, The Far Horizon's Guide to Death. And I am really, really excited to hear all about this game and learn everything. And for our guest for today's episode, we have on Marx Shepherd. Marx, would you like to introduce yourself and who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me onto the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yes, my name is Marx Shepherd. Congratulations on correctly pronouncing the difficult X-SH crossover there. Yeah, I am a tabletop role-playing games designer and editor, and I'm community manager, I think that's the right word, for the Far Horizons Co-op, sort of international collective of TTRPG creators of various disciplines, colours, stripes, all sorts, really. People might know me from Yes Indeed Pod, which I used to host and produce, and various other things, such as being the community manager for the Indie Zine, which is now finished, and various games under my own imprint, Marks of High Water, such as Ghostbox and A Loud Noise in a Quiet Place. Those are the 2 kind of big ones we did a couple of years back. But today, yes, I'm here to represent the Far Horizons Co-op and to talk about Afterwards, our forthcoming anthology of games and essays about death in various forms, which yes. I guess might sound rather morbid. Which I guess that's sort of true, but also we want to kind of take the morbidity out of it. And it kind of comes about because I think everybody in the world has a kind of strange relationship to death related to role-playing games, because on the one hand, like a lot of our favorite role-playing games wouldn't really be that fun without the threat of death to our characters and without other characters, usually non-player characters, being killed or otherwise disposed of. And but at the same time, we're really fearful about the death of our own characters, and I think that's kind of because we just sort of do this embodiment of characters, this kind of internalized personification of characters, and when we're role playing, we do become them, and we impose our own fear of morbidity, I think, on characters. And I thought that's kind of an interesting subject to explore, but maybe a bit too niche. so I sort of thought, well, what could we do instead? What's broader? What's like a really bold statement? And I said, well, let's make a guide to death itself. Let's make a collection of games and essays exploring what death could mean to different people, what kind of exploration of, I don't know, the rituals of death, talking about grief and mourning, talking about what death might mean in a digital age or in a future epoch, and maybe kind of attaching a little bit of whimsy to some of it as well. Yeah. to maybe take the sting out of a subject that people do find difficult to talk about, and do struggle to come to terms with throughout their lives in many cases. I mean, I'm certainly projecting there.
Yeah, for sure not. But no, I think that's actually wonderful. That is such an interesting project. And I looked I was trying to look into more on this project before we did this episode, but I'm glad that you gave kind of an explanation of the inspiration behind this idea, because that is actually very, very interesting. And that's a fun kind of experiment to even do of like these types of games.
Yeah. I think so. Like, sorry, I'll let you go on. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I was curious of how you have found the experience so far, doing these, getting the essays. I know it hasn't just been you writing them, but getting the essays and doing the games and all of that so far.
Yeah, that's right. So this project is going to Kickstarter in September, and will be, if this episode's out in September, it'll be finishing on Friday the 29th. And actually, we don't have much of the writing done yet. What we've done is we have accepted pitches from all across the tabletop role-playing games scene, and we've basically said to loads of people, send us your pitch. What kind of game do you want to make? What kind of essay do you want to write on this subject? And we received 81 pitches.
Oh wow!
In about which is really good, because what we wanted to do was publish 4 games and 1 essay initially in the anthology, and we got almost exactly 4-to-1 ratio of essays to games, games to essays. So that's
crazy,
fabulous. So the first thing that we did was all the staffers then took away a massive chunk of those pitches and filtered through them and said which ones they were really excited about. And then we went for a second round where we found all the ones we were really excited about and tried to put them together into a couple of different potential books and voted on that. And we finally got the one out. Now, all of this work, that sounds like it's quite difficult. I mean, it would be quite difficult if it was just like funding applications, which I also did earlier in the year, where it was like trying to decide which project sounded cool and which one was worthwhile. But then also at the same time, you're exposed to all these potentially unknown content warnings, which is just like, this is a game about... I probably shouldn't, go into any of the pitches in particular detail, but like all of them were, there was stuff about execution, which was a really fascinating game, but I was like, I don't think I can publish this game. It's too scary. And all of these things were just fabulous, fantastic ideas, really interesting. Some of them were just like very difficult subjects. So we tried to spend a lot of time, was what I'm trying to say, being fair and allowing our assessors to kind of take as many breaks as they wanted to for their own well-being. So so that was, I can't remember what the question was, but
that's where the experience so far with all of the games and ideas.
So sort of the experience so far has been really wonderful. And a little bit harrowing. So I also find it quite stressful, like accepting pitches, because I just watch the number go up and up and up and thinking, oh my God, that's a lot of workload for us. But also feeling really responsible for people's ideas. And, what I wanted to say to all of these people was, if you have the wherewithal, go out and publish this yourself, because it sounds super cool. We can't publish it at this time. We do want to publish it, but we can't because we're limited by space. But all of these things sound really interesting, and to the right audience, absolutely an amazing experience. So yeah,
for sure.
But feeling responsible for people's creative input is quite scary.
I bet. I couldn't even imagine. And I feel like as well, I'd like to talk a little bit about like even the tone of the, I'm just going to call it the Guide to Death,
Sure.
as kind of a little bit of a nickname. I'd love to hear about kind of the tone and the intent of the type of games and stories that are going to be in this book, since death is a tricky subject, and you've already mentioned kind of not not accepting some ideas that were a bit more intense and gruesome.
Well, so would you like me to list the games, because I mean it's all been announced, so
sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so we have. I think what we tried to do is, because we've only got one essay in the initial anthology, we've tried to build the games and tie them all into this kind of central essay, which is an exploration of how we might make links between neurotypical and neurodiverse people through this shared understanding of death and morbidity. And I think that's a really interesting theme. And like this is being done as kind of a sociological interview. So you've got the author Bastien is going to interview several people, neurotypical and neurodiverse people, on subjects around death, like rituals and whether it means more or less when people are close or distant to you, and mourning and grief, and
that is fascinating.
Like loads of different subjects, and in a kind of rigorous scientific way. I think he's an academic who works in communication theory. Really,
that is so cool.
Really interesting stuff. So, like, I took the themes that he was talking about in his pitch and kind of tried to bring in a game that tied into that theme, and pull that into the rest of the anthology. So we've got, for example, to do with grief and mourning, we've got a game from Jessica Markram, Unseelie Jess, on Twitter or wherever else you can find her now. And that's a game about a terminally ill person. Already you can tell this is going to be super sad. And their carer, and these two people have been friends for a long time, and they're trying to express their feelings of romantic love for each other in these final moments of this person's life, in the final weeks, final months. Not in the, and I think it sounds like an absolutely incredible game. And knowing Jess's work, I think it's going to be really fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds
obviously that one also sounds really sad. Then we have Porna M, who is she's done a lot of work on just like a few games that sound really cool. I can't think of what she's done off the top of my head, but she's a cool person. And she's writing a game about a myth from the Balkans where if somebody's shadow is buried in the foundations of your house, then that's said to bring good luck to you, but bad luck to them. And that's kind of, we're exploring a kind of gloomy economy. And she says the tone of her game is gloomy, which I like. I love that word. Yes. And kind of looking at, she says it's kind of like the trolley problem, but made into something a bit more tangible. And it just sounds really cool. Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting game. So at the start of the game, you're kind of doing this weird bidding to a third character, like a shadow mage, who's going to actually do this spell. And the house owner says, I've had terrible luck in my life. All of these awful things have happened to me. And I'd just like a little bit of extra luck. And it would be really nice if you could bury your shadow in my house. And the person selling their shadow is saying like, I've had, I really need the money.
Yeah.
Basically. And then you come back to both of their stories later and find out whether or not it's brought them good luck, and whether or not it's brought the shadow seller bad luck, and like what's that meant to their life, and like have they passed away yet? And
that sounds all of these interesting. Super neat.
So I think sounds an interesting game, and I'm really keen on exploring this kind of weird, gloomy myth. I should note that we will be hiring some consultants for all of the games, I think, that deal with specific subjects like grief or mourning. But also in this particular example, to make sure that we do speak to somebody from that part of the world to kind of correctly capture the feeling of this myth and not misrepresent it.
Yeah, I love that extra work and care put into it to make it
for
accurate.
Sure. I think it's
and
essential.
Also, and not because these types of tones can hit people pretty hard, and so being careful on like kind of the sensitivity of it is also really nice to see.
Yeah. Game number 3. So we've done the essay. Game number 3 is, I can't remember what all of them are called. That one is called Shadow Market.
Shadow Market.
And Jess Markram's game is called Farewell My Heart, which is, such like a a cheery title.
Yeah, that one sounds devastating. Like, out of all of them, it's only been the 2 games in the essay, but like that just sounds like devastating, and I would probably just like cry at the end.
I think I would cry throughout. I mean,
yeah.
I'm really keen to have this game out in the world, not just because I think the creator is amazing, but also because I think it's a really important story to consider, a really important story to tell, because I think sometimes some of that stuff gets a bit hidden and left behind, and
it's just very human.
Very human, yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. So what was game 1? Game 3 is called Car on Rails. And this is a much more whimsical take on this. So this is kind of looking at the myth of the ferryman, but through a kind of anti-capitalist lens. I should probably preface that by saying the Far Horizons co-op is kind of explicitly leftist and a kind of very diverse space. And we've always kind of aimed for these, anti-capitalist, anti-establishment, pro-socialism things in what we do, and I think Car on Rails is going to be really good. So it's kind of the idea that there was just one ferryman, but there are so many people dying nowadays that they need a whole company of people, of train drivers, basically. And these psychopomps are kind of going to deal with all sorts of things, but like the idea is that they still have to get these people gently from the land of the living to the land of the dead, and the problems that they deal with and the way that they deal with them might be kind of magical and whimsical in nature, but you're still dealing with a human soul, and you kind of have to treat that with respect and dignity. And I think that is going to be quite an interesting game. It's written by Keith Asada, who is a game designer who is actually a member of the co-op. The other people who have produced games and essays for us are not members of the co-op. And we've worked with them before, and their work is just cool. It's just good. I know this is going to be a good game, and I'm really pleased to be able to kind of give it the justice that it deserves.
And the concepts is really interesting too.
Yeah, so far we've had one like devastating game, one game which is quite gloomy, an essay which is fairly academic in tone, I think that's fair to say. And the final game is called Upon the Digital Sea, and this is the one I'm personally most excited about, because this is a game where there are it's weird to explain it. Basically, it's a game about an online community of people who have known each other for a long time, like a forum or something, or a Discord server, and one of the members has died. And so for the first time, some of the other community members are going to their funeral, and they're going to meet in person for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And then you are telling the story of not only how that person who has died lived and died, but also how the community comes together and then disintegrates afterwards. So it's kind of a story about not only memorializing people, but it's about how communities come together and fall apart, like maybe how they hinge on one person. I'm not sure, totally where some of the stories are going to go with that, but also what does memorializing people look like in the digital age? I think that's really interesting, because it's something that as a society perhaps we've not quite come to terms with yet. I'm thinking of things like Facebook memorial pages. That was kind of a big thing a while ago. I don't know how much it happens nowadays, but like Facebook were taking down people's memorial pages because they knew they were dead. Is that respectful or is that disrespectful? I don't know. Yeah. And I just think it's an interesting subject that is maybe not thought about. And like, I had a conversation with this game with the Dark as Dogs podcast a while ago, and I suddenly thought, if I, touch wood, if I were to die tomorrow, what would happen to the Far Horizons co-op? Or what would happen to the other online spaces that I'm involved with? Like, would they remember? Well, I'm sure they would remember and notice that I was gone, because, the project lead suddenly have disappeared for several projects. But maybe in other communities, would people recognize that you were no longer consistently there. And like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when you've lost touch with somebody on Twitter, or even like going back Google Plus, something like that.
Yeah.
And you've lost contact with somebody, and you occasionally think, well, what happened to that person? Are they still kicking around on the internet, or are they just given up with this, or have they passed away? And sometimes we just never know these things. And
Yeah.
I don't know. That's weird. It's weird.
It is weird.
Yeah.
You're making me think about it, and I'm just like, No,
Yeah,
this is like such an insanely interesting project, just in the ideas that it brings forward and the thought experiments that you kind of have people go on with playing some of these games and really thinking what, you know, what could happen, what does happen when we play these games and explore these stories. And it's, this is fascinating.
Exactly.
I love this so much.
So what I'm really hoping is that it doesn't sound too eclectic, because that's not what we want. I think what I've tried to do is to build together a cohesive mixtape of stuff that will feel like it belongs together. And I think part of that is going to be around theme, and you know, we'll have an editorial team working on that who I think are going to have to try and bring things together in certain places. But I think part of it as well is to do with how things are illustrated, how things are laid out, and like the actual graphics and the physicality of the book itself, which is something I'd like to talk about later. Because all of these things I think are really important, because I don't know how much you personally know about the Far Horizon, Scott, but like your listeners may or may not know that we used to produce digests of short games, sort of like this, every 3 months. And we did that for 2 years. And we didn't theme them. So you went from one game to the next game and there was no cohesion between them. Yeah. And that's not the reason that they didn't sell well, but I think it contributed to it, because in a way it's difficult to sell an anthology of very mixed music, you know, or very mixed anything. I'm sort of coming onto the idea of like, now that's what I call music CDs, because like you don't go out and buy them for their cohesion, right? You go out and buy them because you feel like you ought to, or whatever.
It's a harder sell.
I think it's a difficult sell unless you have some absolute spellbinding musicians, or in our case, game designers in there, which we do, but I'm not sure that they are headliners which could necessarily sell a game entirely on their own merit. I don't know if that's really unfair, because I would 100% go and buy any of these books. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally get it. It's also not a common idea either to just do kind of these short anthology games together. And actually, the first time that I ever saw a book like that was actually last month.
Right.
I visited a game shop up in Ohio, and I got some stuff from their free RPG day. And cool. One of it was, I think it's called like Level Up or something, where it's this little booklet that's filled with a bunch of short games. And it's just like an anthology of a bunch of different games. Yeah, and fabulous. I think, you know, as someone who plays these types of games normally, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know if it was actually like a bunch of games, or if it was just like, if it was essays. And I actually wasn't even going to take the book at first until the person just like gave it to me. It's like, oh, you should check this out. I'm like, okay. And I was then surprised when it had a bunch of short games that were easy to start up and play with a bunch of people that, as well, they all had like tones and how many people were meant to play them, and a bunch of different things like that made it actually a really interesting read. And so to see, I don't know too much about the Far Horizon Corp, but the little bit that I looked into before doing this, I saw your anthology, I think they were like revised versions of your anthology games that you did before. And
yeah,
anyway. And those looked really good and kind of reminded me of that idea of like, you know, just putting a bunch of games in one thing, but it is a really hard sell because it's not just one idea. It's not a straight idea like a normal, not saying that those aren't normal games, but like most people are used to a rule book that like this is a game about playing monster hunters, and that's what the game is.
100%. So the difficulty that I think we've had with selling anthologies before is we would just accept any number of games that our co-op pitch to us. So we'd be trying to sell a game book of 8 to 10 short games. And you get very muddled messages there because you're trying to make each game sound really, really cool. But you're not buying one game. You're buying 10 games. So I think ambition was our enemy there. And what we've tried to do a little bit since then is scale it back. So we've had, for example, the Far Horizons Guide to Cults, which was a book of basically system generic cults that you can just drop into your games.
Yes, that and the heist one look really good.
The heists, heist is really good as well. That's the Role Player's Guide to Heists, which is an absolutely fabulous book. And I think that was the first project we kickstarted as a co-op. Cults was a couple of years ago now. It's almost ready, I think. I hope so, because I've got a cult in that. And then, so our next one is The Guide to Death, which is a little bit different because we've not done an anthology of games in a Kickstarted format before. We've not crowdfunded for an anthology of games before, but we have aimed to lower our ambitions. And we said, what we want to do is we want to make a book of 4 games, 1 essay for starters. If we get a lot of extra funding, maybe we'll extend that a bit. But that's what we want to do. And we want to make a product that looks the business, that looks nice, that feels good to read, feels, when maybe not good to play, because some of them will be dealing with difficult subjects. But in general, it is just like a nice product.
No, for sure. I think
that does the part.
I think going full into one theme, one central theme, is a fantastic way to do these anthology games. Have you found that when you did the heists and the cults game, what was the reception on those versus the more general anthology ones that you did before?
Heists did fantastically well, and I'm really proud of how that did. And we funded cults as well, and that did as we expected it to. And it, overall, we're really pleased with how those games have gone, and ongoing sales on heists has been a pretty strong source of income for a lot of our co-op members, I think. The anthologies, I think in a way, because they're a harder sell, we've not been so successful with those. And that's fine, because some people have bought them and have really enjoyed what's therein. There are a lot of very cool games in there that could and have been republished elsewhere, and that's cool.
That's really cool.
I've got a lot of games in there that I'm really proud to have made. I'm really pleased are out in the world, and that I would just like for people to play, maybe. And if not, then I'll just republish them sometime.
Exactly. But that's, again, I think that, it is then reflective, that strong idea, like, this is a whole thing of heists, this is a whole thing of cults, this is a whole thing on A Guide to Death. I think those are fantastic and a great approach to these style games, because I actually find the idea to be really cool, and especially for people who may not have always the time to learn a new game, or they only really want to do one-shots. These types of anthology type games are really cool because you can pick them up pretty easily. And I'd actually like to talk a little bit about the games that are going to be in this book. I'm guessing are all going to be, role play type games. Are they meant for a specific amount of people? Are there GM-less games? Like, what kind of game, like, what's the structure of the games that are going to be in here?
Great question. Let's rely on my memory for most of it. So, Jess Markram's game, Farewell My Heart, is specifically a duet game. Like Star-Crossed and Dread. It's played with a tumbling block tower, I think.
Oh, that's fun.
I think I'm correct in that. It is not based on Star-Crossed. It is based on the... I can't remember the name of the system, but it's Jess's system, WLW. Can't remember the full name of it. It does not stand for Women Loving Women. It is a good game. It's a good system, and it's a slight twist on the original version in that the game doesn't end when the tower falls. Mm-hmm. That's just the moment that they confess their feelings for each other. Oh. And the game ends sometime later, something to do with cards as well.
That's
I do
so
know
sweet.
Vaguely how this game works. And there will be more detail in the Kickstarter campaign about this.
Oh, of course.
But personally, I have memory issues. Anyway, so that's fine. Shadow Market, the game about shadows and foundations of houses, I think can be played with 2, 3, or more players. So 2 players is the standard version, and I think that's for the person buying the shadow and the person selling the shadow. In the 3-player version, one of the players is also the shadow mage, and then when there are more players, I think they just exchange roles from time to time. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of GM-less but structured.
Very cool.
Let's go on. Car on Rails. Fairly sure is a kind of more traditional game of a game master and a party of players. Mm-hmm. Not 100% on that, and I don't think it was in the original pitch, so that's not all on me. And the last one is Upon the Digital Sea, which is definitely a GM-less, non-facilitated game, but with a kind of act structure that makes it a bit less freeform.
That's actually,
that game has been described to me as being a 55-word game. It would be written in more words than that, but I think it kind of assumes that you're starting with a 10 or 11 word sentence that you then add to or change words from throughout the game. I'm very interested to see where that goes, because it's kind of a fascinating concept to me. I really like games that play with form in a weird way. It reminds me of Paul Sager's game, The World, the Flesh, and the Devil. Possibly not in that order. Yes, it is in that order. Where you write like a paragraph about your character to begin with, and then you underline certain words and make annotations on that. And I think it's kind of that game of playing with text and playing with descriptions of things to
that's
make
really
it
cool.
more exciting. I think that sounds really cool.
Yeah, no, all of
interested
those
to know where that goes.
all of those sound really, really cool, and I love the different ways that they are also played feel fitting as well to the types of stories that they're telling.
Yeah. Yes. I think so. And have you played Star-Crossed?
Have I played Star-Crossed? I don't believe I've even heard of it, actually.
Star-Crossed is Alex Roberts' game of a relationship that shouldn't happen for whatever reason, but it's going to happen. So you have, and it's played with a tumbling block tower. So when the tower falls, that's when, they kiss or their relationship starts, even though it's not supposed to. It's kind of star-crossed lovers, that sort of thing. And the reason I'm talking about that is because that kind of build-up of tension and that kind of build-up of sort of little bit of anxiety about your character is how Farewell My Heart is going to feel. And that is absolutely perfect for the subject matter. So I think
for sure
it's gonna be really good, and I'm very excited to see how that pans out. And the thing I like most about it is that it has that kind of structural twist in that the game doesn't end when the tower falls, and that the relationship continues for a little bit after that. And I think that may be even more heartbreaking than anything else.
Yeah, because you get a glimpse of it, and it's good, and
you get to know what could have happened. Yeah.
Oh man,
I'm sad about it. I haven't even played it yet.
I think that's a great way though. That's how you know you have like a winner of a game when someone can already tell how they're going to feel. I know this is going to break my heart.
I know this is going to make me really sad, and actually I kind of really want that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And making it so that a person does still want to play it and wants to explore that story is also insanely important. Because that's the amazing thing of this anthology that you're doing. Like, so far, even though I definitely know myself, I have a pretty weird relationship with death and how I view it. And it's something that makes me uncomfortable. But it makes me also excited to have an opportunity to explore these types of stories through this game and to think about it and to...
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's not just... It feels like almost a...
If I can sort of put a thought into your mind, I feel like it's a sort of invitation to have a conversation about death in a kind of veiled but also safe way. Exactly. And to me, I think that's what, not saying that only young people play role-playing games, but I think that's what young people don't have. They don't have this opportunity. Well, a lot of young people. I mean, obviously there are people who experience tragedy in their lives, but they don't have this opportunity to kind of go out there and say, well, what does it feel like to go through grief? What does it feel like to go through a mourning process before it happens? And then it's happening to you. And some people will be fine with that. And some people will find that really difficult to not know how they're going to be able to process their feelings in that. So I think, without sounding too high-minded, I think that this work is quite important, as well as being hopefully fun and entertaining.
Fingers crossed, hopefully. No, I think that...
I would like that.
I mean, and that's where I think that you do have a good mix of games too, because there are a few that sound, devastating, but the Chiron one specifically, that sounds, even though there is still care and thought and is still a heavier topic, that one sounds like it can be played while having that conversation and not having to, I guess, take it as, like, it doesn't have to be as consuming.
It doesn't have to be entirely about death, because it can also be about how capitalism sucks.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's fun, right?
Yeah, we love that.
Who doesn't want to roleplay having a terrible boss and like getting your own back on them? I think that sounds really fun. So,
it really does. I mean, I feel like that's why Dimension 20's gotten so popular, because
yeah, for sure. And
we love that.
What I'm trying to do as well, I mean, I can see that this anthology is not for everybody, but I'm trying to make it broad enough so that, maybe 80% of people who look at it say, oh, do you know what? There's a game in there that sounds really cool. And hopefully they back it based on that game that sounds cool, and then find out that the others are also really cool. Yeah. And then what we do is we get 4 authors' names out there just a little bit more and say to the world, hey, these people are cool, you should watch these people because they're going to make more cool stuff. And I guess the co-op as well.
No, I think that's the coolest part, is getting more of those voices out there, more of that, the creativity from people who might not always have the chance to do that themselves. That's what I actually love about, that's a big thing I love about quite a few TTRPG publishing companies, is that they work with smaller creators and get their ideas out there. And then they can have a game that might have been amazing and wonderful as it was when they didn't have a company behind their back, but it wouldn't have done well and people wouldn't have seen it than if they had a company that could actually get it out to the world.
I think we have done that to some extent in the past. So one of the games that we've published before is Kamala Kara Arroyo's Friendship, Effort, Victory, which is like a shonen battle manga.
Oh, that's
RPG.
so fun.
It's so much fun. And Kamala is a wonderful creator, absolutely fantastic. But by herself, she didn't have access to illustrators. She didn't have access to editors. She didn't have access to proofreaders without paying out. So as a co-op, what we do is we take all of the profits from the books and we split them according to how much work somebody put into that project.
I love that.
So what that means is that any creator who brings a project to us has access to our pretty experienced team of illustrators, layout designers, editors, etc. And also has the name for Horizons Co-op behind them, so that you can put that out in the world and sell, in the case of Friendship After Victory, really well. Sell loads and loads of copies of this book and make people quite excited about it. And that's fantastic, because I think by herself, Kamala probably wouldn't have gotten quite the traction that we managed to get with FEV, because it has a super cool cover. And getting access to that cover would have been a lot more challenging for a solo creator. So yeah, that's a big part of our mission, is taking small creators and being able to put them out there, and also like bigging up the editors who work with us, like myself, and bigging up the layout designers, bigging up the illustrators, saying, hey, you know what? It takes a team of about 20 people to make this anthology, and here are all their names, and go out and buy their stuff as well, because they're cool people.
For sure. That's it's always amazing to just see like creators uplifting creators, getting those names out there. That's wonderful. So I love that, along with creating like awesome projects that create really interesting thought experiments and things like that, you also get to do awesome things of working with cool creators and getting their voices out there. Love it.
Yeah. And taking risks, doing stuff that traditional publishing companies might feel is not ideal, even companies, Evil Hat aside, I think most companies would probably take this idea and say, yeah, that sounds cool, but I don't think we can get away with publishing it. And fine, whatever. Let's have collectives of creators working together to produce stuff and splitting profits evenly, and maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Someone has to at least start. And then you can see if it's something that is actually like, this is a good idea, and this is something. So I love taking those risks, even though they are terrifying.
It's less terrifying when you've been through it before. And like I've been a part of, I've run my own Kickstarter. I have been editor on another Kickstarter, and I've worked on various projects that have at some point had crowdfunding attached to them. And the more you do it, like, it's always a little bit anxiety inducing, but I think that reduces with time. So when you've got a level head behind it, and I kind of balking at the fact that I've just described myself as a level head, I think it makes it feel a lot more comfortable for everybody else. And this isn't going to be Avatar: The Last Airbender RPG. This is going to be a much smaller scale project with a much smaller budget, but I still think we're gonna smash it. So.
Yeah, no, I believe it.
Let's do it.
I think the idea is so freaking strong, and I can't wait for it to come out. And actually, I'm curious. Hey everyone, we are at the midway point through the episode now, which is when I'm going to be running a promo for a really cool show called Arthadian Anthologies, and also tell you about some things. First off, if you are enjoying this episode of the RPG Goblin so far, please make sure to give it a follow wherever you listen to your podcast, and also give it a rating if you're enjoying it. Every little bit of support and really helps keep it going, because I know that you guys are liking it. And also, I know I mentioned somewhere in this episode, I can't remember if it's this first part or the second part, the RPG Goblin has an official Discord now. Yay! If you do want to join the Discord and come hang out with me and all my really, really cool guests, the link for the Discord is in my Linktree, which is linktree/the RPG Goblin. You can also find it on Twitter if you look at some of my most recent posts. I'm really, really excited about this Discord and to finally start talking to some of you guys. And basically, it's the perfect place if you want to nerd out. And I'm going to have a whole section where you can find the guests and actually buy the games that we talk about on this show, so that it's easier for you to get them. So I'm really, really excited about that. And yeah, please come join the community. I'm very excited. The next episode of the RPG Goblin, which is coming out Friday 22nd is going to be about a really, really cool game called Castles and Crusades, which is kind of an old school game that replicates the same vibe as early D&D and Pathfinder and such. So if you really like old school fantasy and that vibe in a TTRPG, you would really like to hear about Castles and Crusades, where I bring on Meliora to talk all about it. Meliora is a freelance artist that actually works for Trolls Games, who produces Castles and Crusades, and she has some amazing things to say about this game as it's one of her all-time favorites and is actually working on redoing the character sheets. It's really, really awesome and super cool to just experience a kind of old school fantasy game that is lower on magic. So if that sounds really cool, please make sure to listen to the next episode, which again will be coming out September 22nd. And yeah, I think we are at the end of this midpoint here. Today we have a promo that's going to be playing in a few moments here for the awesome show Arthadian Anthologies, which if you don't know who Arthadian is already, we actually did an episode talking all about his game and passion project, Reborn in Power, and he runs a show that basically talks about the lore of this world, and that is what we're going to be listening to here. So let's roll it.
Greetings, fellow travelers and storytellers. You are invited to explore a new expanding universe where life does not end at death. Experience a science fantasy epic like no other, with an anthology-based podcast that spans across the core realms, incorporating multiple audio fiction sagas mixed with an actual play of a highly customizable, modular tabletop RPG titled Reborn in Power. You can explore it all at your World's Head Codex archive, ArthadianAnthologies.com.
Freaking strong, and I can't wait for it to come out. And actually, I'm curious. So you talked, you mentioned at least at one point that the Guide to Death could be more than the 4 games and the 1 essay. Is that something that's connected to the crowdfunding with potentially reaching over your goal?
Yes. And I think our goal is kind of up in the air slightly at the moment, but we're looking to make about £13,000, which is, I think, about $17,000. If we can get another 2,000 on top of that, we'll get some additional games. The one I've been looking at is Reload by Seamus, Cannibal Halfling Games. So that game's called Reload, and it's kind of like the film Edge of Tomorrow, I think. Ooh. I think that's the film I'm thinking of. Where basically it's a war and the character dies every day. And yeah, it's kind of like a bit like a more bleak version of Groundhog Day, I guess. Ooh. So you just kind of die repeatedly. But none of it is high stakes until the final loop of the game. In which case, if you die in the final loop, you die for real.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Which I think is kind of an interesting take on... Are you familiar with DCC? Do you know about funnels in DCC? Where everybody starts with lots of 0-level characters and you just kind of churn through them. And at the end of the dungeon, whoever has got a character left, that becomes their character for the rest of the campaign. Which is kind of a cool idea in principle.
Yeah.
It's a little bit weird and it's quite glib. It's quite glib and quite gory, and like I'm not a massive fan of it because it's the kind of game that doesn't interest me anyway. But I think it's kind of Reload is going to be a kind of interesting approach to kind of that funnel time loop Groundhog Day Edge of Tomorrow kind of feel. That sort of makes you think about how we treat violence and fatality in role-playing games, and consequently what we mean when we do that creatively. You know, how do we feel about that?
Yeah, no, that's actually really
interesting.
Yeah, no, I like that thought a lot because I think it's very easy to look at these games as a game and look at it through the eyes of, these are just enemies. We kill them and we take their loot, stuff like that. And to actually like have a game that makes you think about that a bit more.
Exactly.
And makes you think of what else is there. That's actually a big reason I do tend to always put a little bit of, backstory or things behind monsters or enemies that my players encounter. And I'll always make it a harder choice and a harder thing to deal with in my games every time that they want to solve something through just straight violence and murder. Because it's not just like, no, these aren't just mindless monsters or mindless people or anything like that. These are real things.
Yeah. And I think that kind of as a culture, like a role-playing game culture, we kind of have a weird connection to murder and theft, right? Like that's not something that, and fine, that is a fantasy that we're dealing with, and like we know that we're trying to. That I know we have this weird relationship between we go and kill things and take their loot, and we gain personal experience that allows us to grow as individuals when we kill things. What a weird message to give to people. And I have a problem with games that do that. I don't want to proselytize about it, but that because that's my personal taste. But I think that in general, like there is a feeling in the co-op that kind of approach to things is weird, and we want to tell different stories. Yeah, and that's kind of why we got sort of excited about Reload, because I think it just sounds like a fun take on things.
No, I absolutely agree. That would be awesome to see get added.
Yeah, so that would be if we can come a little bit later and get a little bit more funding. I'm sure we have some other. Yes, so that's going to be from Seamus Keneally, and that's based on the Breathless system, which is 6 if we get even more money. Is from Austin Home, and that game is called. You'll like this one. That game is called Before I'm Gone Completely, and the pitch of that is you are dying piece by piece, memory by memory. Escape the hospice seniors home to fulfill your bucket list before you forget who you are. Fantastic.
Oh wow.
So I'm really I think this is cool. And I'm not even sure I can express entirely why I think it's cool. Have you seen the film Cloud Atlas, or have you read the book? There's a kind of
Cloud
one
Atlas.
of these stories in that is about a person who escapes from a senior's home. And it's basically that story of escapade and adventure and like trying to deal with memories and difficult subjects like why am I here?
Yeah, man,
and all that. And that's I think that'll be a really interesting a really interesting game as well. And like I know a little bit less about this one because we're not working directly with Austin at the moment, but I think it's going to be fun. So. Yeah,
no, that sounds really, really cool and really, really fun. I really hope that you that you go over the funding goal, because just these 2 games. I don't know if you're adding more.
These extra ones.
Those are really cool.
I think they'll all be on the Kickstarter page, so I can definitely say the other 2, which the third one is Crater, which the pitch for that is, man, it would have been so useful to have this before. An astronaut sits on the moon, their helmet is cracked, and they are lost. They are utterly, completely alone. Which is a solo role-playing game.
Oh, man.
Yes. So that is I'm not sure we even need any more words than that.
Yeah, no, I mean that
I think it's going to be really interesting. And it reminds me of this game, Our Radios Are Dying, by Caitlin Bell. I'm going to say Caitlin Bell. It may not be. Which is basically the same thing, but with 2 players. And Our Radios Are Dying it stands out to me because Jeff Stormer once played it on Party of One, and I couldn't listen to the end of the episode because I was so sad about it.
Oh, no.
And I think that's probably the only time where I had to skip forward on an actual play. So I think this game will do that again. But
Yeah, no, that sounds
as a solo
devastating.
game, obviously we're going to have quite a lot of heavy safety talk in this game. But I think it's a very good subject.
Yeah,
And I
no,
think
that's
it's
an
gonna be very interesting.
amazing subject. And actually, as
And
that,
what a pitch.
yeah, I know that sentence, just that sentence is absolutely amazing. And for someone as one of my favorite, but also like most horrifying episodes that I love in the Magnus Archives being the one of being trapped alone in a spaceship with all the stars blinked out.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, that one gets
But
me
yeah, that
on a
feels
personal
Magnus
level. yeah, that gets me on a personal level.
Yeah.
That
I
sounds
thought you were going to
amazing.
talk about the one in the caves because I listened to that recently. I was
Oh.
like, oh my God.
Yeah,
that's
that
so
was-
scary.
I love that episode too. Absolutely terrifying.
My sister is a caver. When I heard that episode, I was like, well, I hope she doesn't start doing that again.
Oh, no.
This is so scary.
I couldn't imagine knowing someone who does that. I went to like a
just-
cave, I went to like a cave workshop one time where they basically
Right.
just talked about like their experiences of like going cave diving and whatever. And like having that and then listening to that episode, I'm like, I'm
No
never,
thanks.
I know what I'm never doing.
Yeah, being trapped underground, no, that's not my cup of tea.
Last thing I'd like.
The fight, and that's from that game is by Thomas Vorderbruggen. I do not know how to properly pronounce that. That's as good as I'm going to get. Also known as Bogus Cheesecake.
Bogus cheese. I love that.
That's cool. The final one that we would definitely be adding if we get the funding is another essay from Beck Andrew Evans, which is called "Death." Excuse me. The everyday reality of impoverished life, which kind of goes back into that capitalism sucks theme.
Yeah.
And I am really keen to talk about this subject, or for our book to talk about this subject, because I think it sounds very much up our street, which is a kind of exploration of the. I have to personally be careful of what I say because I've not been in poverty in the past, but the kind of casualizing of death and the kind of proximity that people who are in poverty are to, being not having enough money to survive effectively, and what that would do to your psyche and what that would do to your, your personality and the way that you see things. And being able to talk about that, I think is an important thing. And I think it does tie into the themes of the other games as well. Obviously, it has this linking theme, which is it's all about death and dying. But like it ties into Reload, for example, because it's about experiencing near-death experiences over and over again. It's about what you might do in order to get money. Like Shadow Market, it's about ways that you wonder whether you will be remembered, and I'm very keen.
Yeah,
to get this in.
That sounds heavy, but like a really, really good conversation to have out there.
Yeah, and maybe there's a time and a place for that conversation that might be in a book that otherwise contains stuff about a whimsical train company. I think about trashy magazines that you can buy that have both completely pointless and useless stories like Psychic Ache My Hedgehog, and then also using those same stories to kind of springboard people into conversations with each other about serious topics. I think about like soap operas and telenovelas, which basically do the same thing, but from a melodramatic point of view. And actually, I think there's a way that you can combine serious with non-serious subjects that is not just smashing two things together and getting people to laugh at them.
I agree.
It's actually also a completely valid way of doing things, but I think being able to combine the sublime with the ridiculous is definitely a thing that an anthology with a theme is capable of doing. And hopefully it will get people thinking.
Yeah.
Again, being high-minded about these things. Yeah.
I mean, I would hope so as well, because I can't see a way that it wouldn't spawn those types of conversations.
Well, yeah. So that's everything that we've got planned.
And I definitely also love if you would like to, after we're done recording this, give me all of the information for all of the writers. I'd love to put them in the description for this episode as well so that people can check them out individually. Because
Absolutely.
all of these people sound amazing, and just these ideas and the ideas that they have and the conversations that they can start, I am amazed by. So I'd love for more people to check them out.
I will send their details to you. Yeah, absolutely, because they're all really cool designers. Some of them are people I've worked with before. Some of them are people I've wanted to work with for a long time. Some of them I've never heard of, and that's cool because that means that this pitch request went way beyond my social network. And I'm really pleased about that. So, absolutely. I'll get those names to you.
Perfect. That's also just, I love how you talk about that as well. You know, you get to, like, outside of the social circle that you're in, and you get to work with these people that you've been wanting to work with or never heard of. Like, just so many different opportunities coming from this one idea to explore death.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it was because we, apart from me, because we reviewed these pictures without having any names attached to them. We had no idea whose game was whose. I didn't even know. I knew that a couple of people from the co-op had submitted pictures, and I knew that some people I was friends with, both online and offline, had submitted pictures, and it was kind of, it was both great that I had all of these new and interesting contacts, and it was fantastic that we got somebody from the co-op in as well. It was also kind of sad that I didn't get some of these pictures. And I'm not saying that they were worse than the others, because the competition was just so stiff. It was very difficult to make decisions about it. So yeah, sorry to all those people who submitted and didn't get one, didn't get through.
Well, maybe
really sorry.
See, the thing is, at least with that, there's always opportunities for the future too. You know, what if there's a second volume of The Guide to Death, stuff like that.
We do have a secret stretch goal. Ooh. It's not that secret, actually. It's a social stretch goal. If
you're saying it out loud here, it's definitely not going to be secret.
No. If we get enough social media interactions of some kind during the campaign, we will later in the year kickstart a second volume, which I think will be called Besides, as kind of a pun on B-sides. And that will be a digital-only volume of the stuff that didn't make it into the first volume. And I think I've forgotten who I've said is going to be leading that. It's not going to be me. I think that will feel more of an eclectic volume. And I think that's fine. Because I think that's going to be cute. Yeah. I think it's going to be an interesting juxtaposition against this kind of tome. And instead might feel a bit more like a zine, or might feel like a collection of zines or something like that. And I think that's cool as well. So if you go out there, and if you can't back our project, if you just share it and like what we do and repost stuff, whatever the parlance is nowadays. Yeah, and things like that. You know, you can contribute to potentially getting something out in the future as well.
Absolutely. Cool. I love that too. Having ways for people to support outside of, backing the project is always fantastic. Absolutely. So where can people find, where would you like people to go to start helping with that if they can? Like, we're on, I guess, social media, what accounts?
Yes. Okay. Let's see if I can remember the good ones. So we are on Twitter. We are at Far Horizons Co-op on Twitter. I refuse to call it by its new silly name.
Yeah, I haven't either. Every time my friends keep joking.
I hear it on the radio and I'm like, you're being silly. Don't do that.
I know. I say Twitter in front of my friends and they're like, you mean X? And I'm like, no, that's not what I mean.
Certainly do.
I mean Twitter.
We are on Mastodon at Dice Camp. So that's Far Horizons Co-op .dice.co. I don't remember how that works. I don't remember how Mastodon works. We also have an account now at Blue Sky, Blue Ski, or however it's supposed to be pronounced. And that's just farhorizonscorp.bluesky.social. Is that how that one works? Yeah.
It's like B Sky, I guess.
B Sky, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. It's just the main Blue Sky. It's the main Blue Sky server. We've not done very much with that yet. I only got an invite code today, so
Exciting.
So that's there as well. We also have a Discord server, and which you can get to through our regular newsletter, which I think is farhorizonscorp.substack.com. Because it's me writing that and I have a lot of other hats to wear, it doesn't get out more than about once every 6 weeks, but I'll do one next week. So yeah, so it could definitely be something, you can get a lot of information out of the newsletter, and we'll be pushing the Afterwords anthology pretty heavily in that in the next few weeks.
Perfect.
Can I think of anywhere else? You can find our stuff at farhorizons.card, CARRD.co. And I think that's probably everywhere apart from Itch and TTRPG, but you can get to those through the card. So
yeah, perfect. Absolutely. And I'll make sure to also put the information in the description below for everyone. And like Mark said, just support them, interact on the stuff around the Guide to Death, and hopefully the volume 2 will come out, and you get to see all of the other projects that had a opportunity to make it into this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. I'm very, very excited about this. And I'm trying to think if there's any big things that I wanted to cover on the Guide to Death, or if there's anything specific that you were wanting to cover, since I think we are getting closer to the end here.
Sure. I think the only thing that, I don't know, you might want to splice this back in further, is that there will be a digital edition, but we're mainly trying to get a printed edition. And that's going to be a really cool book.
Yeah.
I just want to tell people about this because I've been chasing print specs and printers to give me quotations for months, and I'm really excited about what we've got planned, which is a hardback book, which is cloth bound with a foil printed cover of sorts.
Oh, so this is going to be like when you said tome.
Oh yeah. It's gonna look really nice. It's gonna be A5, so sort of half letter size, a little bit stubbier than a half letter. And the covers that we're putting together I wanted it to be super simple, and I'm like astonished by what our cover designer's doing with this. So it's gonna look cool. It's gonna have skulls, and it's gonna look nice.
So excited.
Then the rest of the book will have a bookmark ribbon, things like that, but just also be a nice, crisp, well made, well put together, well produced book. That's one of the bits I'm most excited about, is just to be able to hold 350 books in my hand, put them through the postal system.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. So, it's not going to be the cheapest book, but I think you're going to want to have it. So.
And that's where the digital options are always nice. And actually,
digital options will be available. Yes.
How many pages is this going to be?
Oh, I think we budgeted maybe 150 pages. So it's not huge, not like a right heckin' chonkosaurus, but it is
Chonkosaurus.
It is a book which I think will feel nice. I think what it will feel like is the kind of thickness of a nice journal, like 150, 200 page journal with a lovely cover that you can put in your bag and take with you on a summer's day to read in the field somewhere.
Oh, sounds lovely. I love it. No, this sounds absolutely amazing. I am so excited about this, actually.
Super.
I can't wait for it to come out and to just see also everything, like, see everything written out and be able to see the art of the book and see the book itself and just like all of the little things. I can't wait. Oh man, it's so exciting.
Fantastic. Well, as I said before, it will be kickstarting in September. We'll be finishing September 29th. I'd say Friday. Definitely, because I don't want it to go into October.
Yes. done before the
my
spooky
last
season.
opportunity. Yeah, because otherwise everything's going to be all spoopy saturated.
Exactly.
I need to pull ahead of the game a little bit there. So.
Be ahead of the curve.
That's our intention. Because this isn't spooky. This isn't horror. This is just death.
Yeah, it's death, and it's thinking about death and
Simple.
having those conversations, which I love, and I can't wait for it to come out. And this episode is going to be out around the time, either before or after. We will see where it lies in the schedule for sure. But I will, when I do the intro and stuff, everyone who listened, you'll probably already hear if it's out or not, and where to find it, which will be on Kickstarter.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I will send you a link when we have one.
Perfect. I will definitely be sharing that around then. Yeah, I am so excited about this. And I think that it's about time to wrap up. And I want to say this has been amazing to hear all about this anthology game. I am so very excited to actually see it and to hopefully explore the games myself and maybe get some of the people that I know to play them with me. But this has been fantastic. And I think we'll do one last question before we wrap up here. And that's going to be what you are the most excited about with this project.
Oh, heavens. I am most excited about getting to work with not only some of my favorite people from the co-op, such as Ninfael, our layout designer, art lead, illustrator, just a fabulous person all around, and people like John Boyle, resident bard, one of our editors, and just loads of cool people. Like, the team is massive. I'm very excited about working with all of them, but I'm also really excited about bringing new people, new perspectives into our co-op workflows and to find out what other people think of them and to learn from what ways that they like working as well. And I know that Pornet M and Jess Markram are really good at leading projects, so hopefully I get to learn a little bit about how to do it properly.
Absolutely.
I'm just excited to be working with people again and to be bringing a cool project to bear based on that.
Absolutely. I think that is so fair. Working with people is amazing. That's been one of my biggest things with the podcast that I've enjoyed so much, is getting the opportunity to work with so many cool people.
Yes,
it's like,
absolutely.
I love you guys.
Yeah, it's always so good. Like, when I used to run a podcast, it'd be like, oh, I don't think this person would want to talk to such a tiny podcast to me. Don't be ridiculous. And then I was like, just tried it. Why not? And then, like, not to name drop really, but like James D'Amato was like, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you, whatever. or like Jess Storm was like, yeah, sure, Marx, whatever. Let's chat. And now we kind of interact quite regularly. Or like, Vincent Baker was very happy to come on the podcast and talk to me. I was like, this is a big deal. Why so casually about this? But, I think it's fantastic. And actually, like, these big designers, because they want to talk to people, they want to sell this stuff, but also they want to talk about this stuff, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and everyone's just so nice too, and it's just absolutely lovely. Yeah, I mean, mostly, yeah, that's true. There have been some bad apples and certain people, but for the most part, everyone is usually fantastic.
Everybody
And you have been you have been absolutely lovely. And thank you so much for coming on and talking about The Guide to Death with me, because this has been fantastic, and I just absolutely love learning about it. Yeah.
Thank you for having us, I suppose. It's been you're hosting the co-op as well as me, so Thank you very much. And
yeah. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. And I hope that you have enjoyed. And please make sure to check out Marx Shepherd. What is your Twitter? Where can they find you specifically on social media?
Right. So on most social media, I'm Phofos. That's PHOPHOS. On Twitter, somebody had already taken that one. So I am Phofos on Twitter. But I gotta say, I'm not there very much anymore. I'm mostly on Blue Sky now, and Discord. You can always find me on Discord because I'm just like splurging conversations with people all the time. So
Perfect.
Yeah, Discord is almost certainly the best place to find me.
Perfect. All right. Absolutely fantastic. So, go check out Marx on, those social medias if you're on Blue Sky and things like that. And also, hopefully by this point, I also will have my own Discord server up and open to the public for people to join. And you can talk to Marx possibly even here, potentially.
But yeah, for sure. Yes.
But yeah, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you everyone for listening. We will end it here.